Hello and welcome to another Farbank Fly Fishing School episode. This episode may be the most useful episode of your fly casting life as it delves into the highly efficient fly casting technique called the double haul. Double hauling is much more than a style of fly casting. It increases line speed dramatically, which gives the caster much more distance, better line control and penetration in the wind. And it results in a lot less fatigue after a day casting on the water. Usually considered difficult to learn, this episode breaks the components down into simple step-by-step sections that makes it easy and fast to learn. As you will see, learning to double haul the army way will soon have you making longer casts than you've ever done before. Oh, and if you know how to double haul already, don't worry. This episode has some great advanced tips that will help even the best casters out. So before we get into the episode, what is double haul? Well, in fly casting terms, the haul is the terminology for you pulling the line with your non-casting arm. Right-handed caster, pull with the line, and your non-casting arm, that's a haul. And a double haul, simply twice. So double hauling is good. We'll see in this episode why you double haul. You can also put a single haul on, and a lot of people do put a single haul when they're casting. They make a haul on the back cast and make a forward cast. And while that speeds up your back cast, it doesn't really speed up your forward cast. So a much better technique is to learn a double haul, two hauls. And that's what this episode's about. Now you may ask, why does a double haul work? How does it work? Well, let's take a little look at that with this rod. I've threaded this rod up, tied it to something, and when casting, what we're trying to understand is the flex of the rod is something you're trying to achieve. The more the rod flexes, the more the rod will ping and fire the line, so you get line speed. And look what happens to the rod when you haul. You increase the bend. That bend increase is excellent. It gives you more line speed, and you can use less effort. So simply hauling on the line at the right time increases the load, makes it a more efficient casting technique. And as you'll see in this episode, you're going to find out that you can have different haul lengths according to what you're going to be doing. You might have a long haul here, or you might even do things called tweaks, which are just short hauls. But if you have two of them, it's the double tweak. Now, before you get into that, before you go, oh yeah, this is something I want to learn, I've always wanted to learn double haul, just one word of warning. Do make sure you have a really good cast first. Make sure you've got nice loops, back and forward. Make sure you've got good positive stops and you have complete line control and your timing's right. Because if you don't have a good back cast and a good forward cast, you're not going to find double haul very easy to learn. So get that dialed in first and then get out double hauling. And to learn to double haul, you probably should start with some specialized gear. If you want to learn this really quickly, you should start with specialized gear. And we're going to take a look at exactly what that is in the very next chapter. Learning to double haul, like anything, is quicker if you learn an easy way. And the easiest way of learning double haul is to start with the simplest gear you can possibly do. And there's a thing called shooting head. If you're a fly fisherman and you fished a little bit, you might know it. If you haven't, you might not know it. But a shooting head has a fat bit of fly line, that's this olive thing here, and it's attached independently to a very, very thin bit of line. That's called shooting line or running line, whatever you want to call it, but it's a really thin bit and it's a really thick bit. And you'll see why when we go into the next chapter of why that's important, but really if you want to double haul easily, start off with a shooting head. And if you don't know what shooting heads are and the kind of gear to use for shooting heads, I would start off with something like this. This is a slick shooter. This is a shooting line we make at Rio. It's 25 pound. It's very, very thin. Get yourself set up with this. You just tie this onto the backing, you wind it on, put a loop, and then to that loop, you're going to attach just a regular shooting head. This is the outbound shooting head. It's a 7-weight. If you have a 7-weight rod, you put it on a 7-weight. If you're learning with an 8-weight, put it on an 8-weight. But basically, you get your head and you get your shooting line, put them together, and that is the easiest outfit, hands down, to double haul with. And I've taught hundreds of people to double haul, and you can do it in a really short time by utilizing gear like that to get the fundamentals going, get the fundamentals right. But like anything, you have to evolve as a caster. And as you evolve as a caster and your techniques get more dialed in and your timing gets a little bit better, you want to move out away from these shooting heads. And that's where you move up to what's called an integrated shooting head, where the head and running line are together, part of the setup. This is an outbound short we have at Rio. This would be your next So you've got your rhythm going with the shooting head and you want to step up, then go to an integrated shooting head. And then as you get to dialed in with that and you get better and better at casting that, then you want to step up to your regular weight forward line. This is a real gold, weight forward 5. Whatever your regular weight forward is, that's the next level. That's your improvement. That's your evolution as a double haul caster. And then if you want to be really good and you really want to hone your double haul skills, probably the hardest line you can double haul with is a double taper. There's a lot of friction in a double taper. There's a lot of thickness and the line doesn't feed. And we'll talk about feeding later on in a further chapter. The line doesn't feed so well, but it becomes a really good crutch for you to learn to become better and better. So if you want to improve on your double haul, go to your weight forward and then finally end up with a double taper line. And that is the quickest way for you to progress your way through double hauling. And really on that note, what we need to do is look at what double hauling is. So let's go down to our loop lab and look at exactly how to learn to double haul. So here we are in the wonderful Farbank Loop Lab. We've got Tegan in the background here, double hauling. I'm going to learn the double haul, perhaps the simplest and easiest way, we call the army style. Keep it really simple. Tegan's set up with the outfit I showed you at the beginning in the studio there. We've got that shooting head on the front end of the line. Got this very, very thin monofill. Everything's overloaded because we want to make this easy. We want the line to pull and give you messages of when you should be casting. So overload and setting up everything's pretty important. The hardest thing for most beginners to get when they learn the double haul is that the casting hand is going to do 2 moves, back and forward. And the non-casting hand is going to make 4 moves. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like playing the piano. I can't do it because I can't get my hands to do separate things, but double haul is that. You've got to have to do 2 moves with this and 4 moves with that. And the 2 moves are the haul, and the haul is the term for when you pull the line away from the rod, and then the feed, which is the term for when the hand comes back to the rod. And what's important about these is the timing of the haul and feed. When you do the right kind of back cast, if you watch the 2 hands here, the hands are together. What you don't want to do is leave the bottom hand behind. That is not a great way of double hauling. What you want to try is both hands should come up and then they haul and separate away as you do that back flick. Same time as you do the flick. That's really important to get that haul. Then the right hand stays dead still, the casting hand stays dead still, and this hand here holding the line slides beautifully back, meets it. And then the same thing to be really careful of on the forward stroke, drive both hands forward and haul there as you rotate the rod. So bad, leaving hand behind, hauling early. Good is delaying the haul here and delaying the haul there. So those are kind of words of warning to get you started. And the easiest way of doing this is what's called the army style. My dad taught me this when he was teaching me how to fly cast and how to teach. And he said, son, just keep it really simple and break this thing down into 4 separate moves. Don't try and learn everything at once. And those 4 separate moves are very, very easy. We can see Tegan back here. He's going to show us the army style. And very simply, you're going to make your back cast. You make your back cast and put a haul in, and then you just stop. Let the line land on the grass if you're in a park or on the background or in the car park or wherever you are. And then you keep your hand still, your casting hand dead still. And that hand holding the line feeds back. Very important, it feeds back to the casting hand. Then you stop again. You have these breaks. It gives you time to kind of process it. And then your forward cast starts, you drive forward, put that haul in with a snap, and then you stop again. And then you bring your hand back on that last feed, and you're back to the starting point. That's the army style. So you're going to learn it easiest, quickest way. Don't try and be macho and just say, oh, I can do that because it looks really easy, and pick it up and your hands are flailing everywhere and you have no control. If you can't learn the double haul, be humble and break it down into these simple 4 moves. Just to reiterate again, you're going to make a back cast with a haul and you stop and you wait, say for a count of 3. Let the line fall down, then you keep your rod still, slide your hand back, make sure the hand meets the rod, then you drive your forward cast forward, as you can see Tegan's doing right here, making this 1, 2, 3, 4. Break it down like that. And one of the greatest things about breaking it down is it really reinforces the correct muscle memory. There's a terrible affliction in double hauling when you're learning it called creep. And creep is, I'm going to show you with my two hands here. Watch this creep thing. When I do my back haul there, what's really important is the hand holding the line goes back to the rod, all in one go. And then you come forward. And what creep does, what a lot of people do when they're learning this double haul, is the rod hand and the line hand come together and creep and meet here like that instead. And you've lost half your forward cast. That's a thing called creep. Don't be a creep. Make sure you've got this haul. Make sure the hand comes all the way back to your rod. Your rod is dead still. Drive forward and finish the forward cast. And again, you can see Tegan here demonstrating the worst thing about casting. The double haul is called this creep thing. If you can avoid the creep, your hauls will be super effective. And really, you just practice that. You practice those 4 moves, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, out on the park, wherever it is. Get your rhythm going, get the haul, get your 4 hands moving and your 2 hand moving components so you become smooth. And then you've got to put it all together to become a little bit better at this double haul. And we'll take a look at that in the very next chapter. The simplest way of putting it together is to reduce 4 into 2. And what that means is instead of doing 4 individual separate steps, 1 3-second pause, 2 3-second pause, 3 3-second pause, 4 3-second pause. You want to start to get the groove together, which means basically your hand does 2 moves. It goes 1 and 2. You put those 2 moves together, 3 and 4. And you put those 2 moves together. And as you practice those 2 moves together, you start to build up a nice constant rhythm. And that's really good. Rhythm's really good. And one of the best things to remember or to think about is just imagine you've got a tennis ball and you're serving at Wimbledon for the match and you're bouncing, ready to serve. Well, that's kind of the speed of your whole feed. Your left hand is that tennis ball. It should go boing, boing, boing. It doesn't linger down here and it doesn't go really quick up. So think of your hand as a tennis ball which is bouncing. That'll give you an idea of the right timing between 1 and 2, 3 and 4. Now, the other thing you've got to really remember, we talked about in the other chapters, creep. What you really got to be, this is where creep really comes in. People really get into the creep here because they're eager to get 1 and 2 together. And invariably what happens is you're going to go like this. 1, 2, and your hands have met here. There's the deadly creep. If you have that, just take back a step. Go back to your 4 moves, get them independent, separate, and then when you get those separate again, then try, okay, I've got to meet behind me. I've got to meet behind me. 1, 2, 3, 4. And really one of the most important things is to have enough sensitivity in your fingers to feel the line going through the back here. Whatever speed your line's going that way, 20 miles an hour, your feed should be 20 miles an hour, the same speed as the line. That's perfect because it means the hand is being pulled up by the line. What you don't want to do is have a 20 mile an hour back cast and a 40 mile an hour feed. It's very erratic and gives slack and it's out of control and there's lines everywhere and you look like a robot. You don't look like a fly fisherman. Fly fishing is a beautiful, poetic, gorgeous thing to watch when people cast. So you should be like that. And that means you have enough sensitivity in your non-casting hand to haul and feed and let the hand be pulled up by the speed of the cast. 1 and 2, let it fall. 3 and 4. You can see Tegan doing that beautifully. See how smooth that is. That's exactly what we're trying to achieve. And once you're comfortable with these 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, then we really want to get in the final part of this casting thing, which is getting in the groove, putting all of this together until you become a very smooth, beautiful double hauler. We're going to take a look at that in the very next chapter. The best way to get your groove going in this double haul is to take those 2 moves to 1 move. Remember we started with 4 moves, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we're going to go 2 moves, 1, 2, 3, 4, and now the groove becomes 1 move. You basically want to get to the point where you're so comfortable with those separate moves that you can literally pick your cast up and go 1, 2, 3, 4. And your only 3-second pause is in front of you when you've done those 4 moves. You will get there. It's just a little bit of mindset and working hard to get those 4 moves. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4. Focus on getting your haul timing right. Like we said, focus on not creeping. don't you dare creep, and focus on make sure your speed of your feed is accurate and good. And when you've got that, you evolve another little bit step. And that is, instead of stopping in front of you for 3 seconds, you build up a rhythm. And the best way of building up a rhythm is to keep the casting going with false casting. And that is where you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You don't have any 3-second pauses. You just build up this rhythm. And sure enough, you will soon find that your hauling hand becomes natural. And then the next step is to get control back of this rod. Your mind is so focused on learning that if you took away the haul and watched people casting, you'd say, there's no way somebody's casting like that. Their rod is casting in a terrible style. But the reason we've set up shooting heads is you can cast as badly as you can, but the haul will still work. You've got your haul going, but now you've got to grow up a little bit. You've got to take those training wheels off, and you've got to get control of your rod. So gradually, as you start to double haul, your line, your casting stroke might be all over the place. You have big arcs, you have no line speed, but the haul is working. But gradually switch your brain from your left hand, your hauling hand, to your casting arm, and go away from these big arcs. You can see Tegan's doing this demonstration beautifully as people evolve. You've got these wide arcs, but your mind switches to your rod. You start get your casting going. You keep the haul going. And you know what? I think you can pat yourself on the back because you probably have just mastered the basics of the double haul. And whilst those basics are step by step easy to get to with a shooting head, you're not really going to fish with a shooting head. That is your training wheels of the double haul. When you're really comfortable with false casting with your shooting head, you've got to evolve as a fly fisher. There's something you're going to be fishing with. We'll take a look at that in the very next chapter. So that's the basics of double haul. Learn it with a shooting head. Learn it the army style. Get the basic foundation going. Get your tempo right. Get comfortable with double haul. But you've got to evolve. You can't just be chucking shooting heads because you're not going to catch a lot of fish and it's going to land with a lot of impact. Plus, you're not progressing. And all these things are designed to get a better and better caster. And how you do that, essentially, is a choice of your line. When you've got the double haul going with that basic shooting head, probably the next thing to do is go to what's called an integrated shooting head. This is an outbound short we make at Rio. And it's essentially the same setup we had, but there's no loops and there's no knots. It's got a heavy head at the front end. It's got a thin running line, so it really is easy to double haul. That heavy head pulls the line back, makes it easy to feed, and it shoots the line forward. So it's very, very comfortable. And again, if that's your next step, that's probably how you should evolve. But again, it kind of is a shooting head. So you're not going to fish shooting heads, even integrated shooting heads. So I would say that your next step for evolution is go to your regular weight forward, whatever you're going to fish with, right? Your weight forward is what you're going to fish with. Now, weight forwards are a lot harder to double haul with when you're learning than your shooting head, and certainly than your integrated shooting head. The running line is thicker. That means more friction. The head is a little bit lighter. That means there's not as much tugging. But as your next step, and as you're going to fish weight forwards, that is a vital step. Practice with your regular fishing weight forward. And then, if you want to get really good and have the most beautiful double hauling, make it harder. Go to a double taper. So a double taper line is the hardest line to double haul. It's a little thicker in the body section, so there's more drag, more friction. It's a little less heavy at the front, so there's not so much line pulling, so it just becomes harder to double haul with a double taper. But if you're one of those casters who want to really master your double haul, then that's the final step, is to practice with a double taper line. And once you've chosen the line, once you've got your rhythm going, the next step, and remember with all of these, we're just casting with a fixed length of line, 30 feet or whatever it is. But your next step is going to actually shoot a little bit of line on every single cast. Here you can see Tegan double hauling. He's starting with a short head, short amount of line out. And if you watch his hands, every time he makes a back cast, he lets a little bit slip through the back cast. And then he catches it and holds it, makes a forward cast, lets a little bit slip on that forward feed. And that's your next evolution step. That's really going to be useful for you as a saltwater angler or fishing on a lake when you want to get a distance. You want to have this feeding of the line and getting it a little bit longer. With your regular weight forward, you do that until the whole head is out, and you make one cast, one final double haul, and shoot the prodigious cast. And if you've got a double taper, you sneak a little bit of line out every cast until you want to lay down and present it. So those are your steps to becoming better and better double hauler. But one last tip I want to give you is casting what's called advanced style. And I'll show you advanced style. Take a little look at the rod here. When you flex a fly rod, if I flex it down like this, you'll notice that the fly line is touching the back of the rod guides. Just the rod guides, nothing else. This is how a rod flexes when you make a back cast. But when you make a forward cast, the rod flexes this direction. And now, when you look at the fly line, it touches the whole blank. It touches the rod guides and the blank, and that is a huge amount of added friction. It's adding colossal amount of friction, and double hauling becomes really hard when you have that friction. So if you try double hauling with a system like that, particularly with light lines, like a 1-weight or a 2-weight, or maybe a double taper with that thicker running line, you're going to find that as you double haul, when you try and do your back feed like that, the line doesn't feed, you have this slack loop hanging down from you, it doesn't feed, and people wonder why, what have I lost in my double haul? And it's because the line is sticking to the back of the rod with all that extra friction. So when you get that problem, which you will get as you evolve down the double haul path, then there's two simple options. The option I learned, called advanced style, is very simple. You just turn this rod 90 degrees and put your arm across the reel and hold the rod like that. Why you do that is because when the rod flexes down like this on the back cast, the line only touches the rod guides. And equally, even better, when the rod flexes this direction for the forward cast, the line only touches the rod guides. So there's no added friction, which means double hauling becomes a lot easier. So you could do the advanced style, and I would thoroughly recommend it when you get to that double haul situation where you're not feeding slack. But one thing a friend of mine told me about 15 years ago was, Simon, why are you holding the rod sideways? One of the problems holding it sideways is the weight of this reel wants to drop back there. So you've got to hold the rod a little bit tighter. I'm used to that. I love it. I think there's a lot of benefits holding it sideways, which maybe I'll tell you about one day. But if you don't like that and the reel keeps turning down, he just told me, Simon, why not just turn the top 3 sections 90 degrees? And so you're holding the rod normally, and your top 3 sections are 90 degrees, so the rod rings are aligned out here. And again, you've solved the problem, because when the rod bends this way, the line only touches the guides. When the rod bends this way on the forward cast, the line only touches the guides. So you haven't increased the friction, and your double hauling just becomes a little bit easier. But be warned, because you know what's going to happen. You're fishing away, and you will get countless anglers stopping you saying, hey mate, your rods aren't aligned. Can you just align your rod rings? And they'll get a little upset because you haven't aligned your rod. So be prepared for those comments, but you know what you'll get? You'll get your best double hauling, the smoothest double hauling you can. And particularly when you go down to those lighter lines or the double tapers. And really that's your sequence. That's a whole sequence for you to become a much better double hauler. Evolve through the lines and get to this little advanced style, or just turn the rod 90 degrees and you will become a master of the double haul. So with all that you've seen, you should now understand how to go from never having double hauled to becoming a really advanced technical double hauler with those hard to cast light lines and double tapers. Quick summary of what we've gone through. If you're going to learn the double haul, start with the army style. Make 1 cast, but have 4 movements. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Remember the army style? Best possible way of learning. When you get comfortable with that army style, instead of those 4 movements, remember we went to 2 movements. 1 and 2, tennis ball, 3 and 4. And then when you get there and you get that comfortable, you just do the 1 cast, 1, 2, 3, 4, lay that down. And then the final progression, if you recall, is to get into the false casting, where you build up a rhythm. You build up an inherent rhythm inside you that is good, where you're false casting and double hauling. And then again, make sure you progress through the gear. Start with a shooting head. Oh my gosh, the number of people I've taught, and you can learn it so fast with a shooting head. Don't miss that step out. But evolve. Evolve from a shooting head to the integrated shooting head, like this outbound short. And then go on to your weight forward. Take these steps. It makes you a much faster learner by taking these steps. And finally, and only if you want to be a really, really good double hauler, get on to the double taper line, because that is technical. That way you really, really need good hauling and good casting. And once you get to that point, you know what? Congratulations to you. You just learned how to double haul. It's perfect for the saltwater angler on the bow of a boat shooting to a fish with tough winds. It's an excellent technique for utilizing on the shore of a lake or on the side of an ocean where you want to chuck the line as far as you possibly can. And above all, it's a wonderful technique for casting and reducing the amount of effort you use as a caster. And that really, in a nutshell, is what double hauling is all about. So there you have it, a technical, educational and informative lesson on how to learn and master the incredible effective casting technique called the double haul. Hopefully you've learned how to get started with a simple army way, and you can see how to progress and grow your skills until you are a proficient, effective double hauler, getting more distance, better wind penetration, and being able to use a lot less effort with your fly casting techniques than in the past. As always, I want to end this episode with a friendly reminder to do your part in keeping the river clean and the fish healthy. Look after the environment. Leave no trace of your visit to the water, and please treat the fish you catch with the utmost respect. Thanks a lot for watching this episode. I hope to see you on the water somewhere one day, launching some bombs with your newfound double haul skills.